Good morning to everyone. This is Adya from class 8 and today I am going to read out chapter 7, A Visit to Cambridge. So do follow me. Chapter 7, A Visit to Cambridge. Before you read, this is the story of a meeting between two extraordinary people. Both of them disabled or differently abled. As we now say. Stephen Hawking is one of the greatest scientists of our time. He suffers from a form of paralysis that confines him to a wheelchair and allows him to speak only by punching buttons on a computer which speaks for him in a machine-like voice. Firdaus Kanga is a writer and journalist who lives and works in Mumbai. Kanga was born with brittle bones that tended to break easily. When he was a child, like Hawking, Kanga moves around in a wheelchair. The two great men exchanged thoughts on what it means to live life in a wheelchair and on how the so-called normal people react to the disabled. Cambridge was my metaphor for England. And it was the strange that when I left, it had become altogether something else because I had met Stephen Hawking there. It was on a walking tour through Cambridge that the guide mentioned Stephen Hawking. Poor man, who is quite disabled now, though he is a worthy successor to Isaac Newton, whose chair he has at the university. And I started because I had quite forgotten that this most brilliant and completely paralyzed astrophysicist, scholars of astrophysics, branch of physics, dealing with stars, planets, etc. The author of A Brief History of Time, one of the biggest bestsellers ever, lived here. When the walking tour was done, I rushed to a phone booth and almost tearing the cord so it could reach me outside, phoned Stephen Hawking's house. There was his assistant on the line, and I told him I had come in a wheelchair from India. Perhaps he thought I had propelled myself all the way to write about my travels in Britain. I had to see Professor Hawking. Even 10 minutes would do. Half an hour, he said. From 3:30 to 4. And suddenly, I felt weak all over. Growing up disabled, you get fed up with people asking you to be brave As if you have a courage account. On which you are too lazy to draw a check. The only thing that makes you stronger is seeing somebody like you. Achieving something huge. Then you know how much is possible. And you reach out further than you ever thought you could. I haven't been brave. Said his disembodied computer voice. The next afternoon. I have had no choice. Surely. I wanted to say. Living creatively. With the reality of his disintegrating body. Was a choice. But I kept quiet. Because I felt guilty every time. I spoke to him. Forcing him to respond. There he was. Tapping at the little switch in his hand. Trying to find the words. On his computer. With the only bit of movement left to him. His long pale fingers. Every so often. His eyes would shut in frustrated exhaustion. And sitting opposite him. I could feel his anguish. The mind burnt with thoughts. That came out. In frozen faces and sentences. Stiff as corpses. A lot of people seem to think that disabled people are chronically unhappy. I said, I know that's not true myself. Are you often laughing inside? Buoyant. Intensely active and vibrant. About 3 minutes later. He responded. I find it amusing. When people patronize me. And do you find it annoying? When someone like me comes. And disturb you in your work. The answer flashed. Yes. Then he smiled his one-way smile. And I knew. Without being sentimental or silly. That I was looking at. One of the most beautiful men in the world. A first glimpse of him is shocking. Because he is like a still photograph. As if all those pictures of him in magazines and newspapers have turned three-dimensional. Then you see the head twisted sideways into a slump. The torso shrunk. Inside the pale blue shirt. The wasted legs. You look at his eyes. Which can speak. Still. And they are saying something huge and urgent. It is hard to tell what. But you are shaken. Because you have seen something. You never thought could be seen. Before you. Like a lantern. Whose walls are worn so thin. You glimpse only the light inside. Is the incandescence of a man. The body. Almost irrelevant. exist only like a case made of shadows, so that I, no believer in eternal souls, know that this is what each of us is, everything else an accessory. What do you think is the best thing about being disabled? I had asked him earlier. I don't think there is anything good about being disabled. I think I said. You do discover how much kindness there is in the world. Yes, he said. It was a disadvantage of his voice synthesizer that it could convey no inflection, no shades, no tone. And I could not tell how enthusiastically he agreed with me. Torso, upper part of the body. Incandescence, inner glow or light. Accessory, not essential but extra. Though decorative. Inflection, rise and fall of the voice in. Every time I shifted my chair or turned my waist to watch the time, I wanted to make every one of our 30 minutes count. I felt a huge relief and exhilaration in the possibilities of my body. How little it mattered then that I would never walk or even stand. I told him how he had been an inspiration beyond cliche for me and surely for others. Did that thought help him? No, he said. And I thought how foolish I was to ask. When your body is a claustrophobic room and the walls are growing narrower day by day, it doesn't do much good to know that there are people outside smiling with admiration to see you breathing still. Is there any advice you can give disabled people? Something that might help make life better. They should concentrate on what they are good at. I think things like the Disabled Olympics are a waste of time. I know what you mean. I remembered the years I had spent trying to play a Spanish guitar, considerably larger than I was, and how gleefully I had unstringed it one night. Cliché, phrase or idea used so often that it loses its meaning. Claustrophobic, very small and suffocating. Claustrophobia is an abnormal fear of being in an enclosed space. Gleefully, very happily. The half hour was up. I think I have annoyed you enough. I said, grinning. Thank you for. Stay. I waited. Have some tea. I can show you the garden. The garden was as big as a park. But Stephen Hawking covered every inch. Rumbling along in his motorized wheelchair, while I dodged to keep out of the way. We couldn't talk very much. The sun made him silent. The letters on his screen disappearing in the glare. An hour later, we were ready to leave. I didn't know what to do. I could not kiss him or cry. I touched his shoulder and wheeled. Out into the summer evening. I looked back. And I knew he was waving. Though he wasn't. Watching him. An embodiment of my bravest self. The one I was moving towards. The one I had believed in. For so many years. Alone. I knew that my journey was over. For now.